So, I've done a lot of research into religion. It's become my favorite subject because I find it really interesting. It's got a mix of philosophy, history, psychology, and politics that's truly fascinating. I've done a lot of thinking about it myself too, and I have a few points to make that I've thought up over the years. I'm an atheist, so most of it is in support of that position, either directly or indirectly. First, and most crucially for me, is determining what the end goal is for humanity as a whole. My answer to that has for a while been that humanity is creating better tools every day and even improving ourselves as well. We live longer than we used to, we're better educated, and we can certainly do things that people never dreamed of, like go to other planets or change the climate. When I think of the future, I extend that, as most do when thinking seriously about it. Theoretically, there's no limit to that potential, so it's pretty logical to assume that we have the potential to become what we think of as gods. I don't think many would disagree that it's a perfectly reasonable extension of our history. Now, add in an Abrahamic religion, the idea that there's a single all-powerful being that created us. I would think that would be a part of its intention, that we could become powerful enough to help it in some way that it can't do on its own. Religions have often thought of God as omnipotent, but I think that's deceptive. If it truly had no limits, it would have no need to do anything. There would be no motivation for it. Far more likely is the idea that God is seemingly omnipotent, but not really. Perhaps the meager tasks we might require are nothing to its true limit, but that there is a limit. Remember that once we would have had no idea about higher dimensions, whereas now we know that we are limited to only three dimensions, but there are more. If God exists, it would certainly exist in those higher dimensions, so its limits would be related to that. I definitely think that if there is a God, it intended for us to become what we're becoming, because otherwise we wouldn't have had that ability. Of course, there's no evidence that there is a God in the first place, so while it's fun to think about and theorize, it's a little academic. The fact is that no one knows anything about metaphysics for sure, because otherwise it would be normal physics. Religions, to me, are like an ancient form of fiction that people had trouble separating from reality because they didn't know enough about the world to know the difference between that reality and fiction. Nowadays, they really should know better, but it's become so ingrained in culture that they can't extricate themselves from it. That brings me to my next point, why atheism is the default position when I don't know anything for certain. Pascal's wager. Why not believe, given that not believing carries such a potential punishment? The answer that's commonly given is the bewildering variety of beliefs to choose from. They're mutually exclusive, so which do you go for, taking what you're raised to believe out of the question? Humans have a drive to understand the world. It's important for knowing how it will react to you so you can master it. With most things, we by default try to find the truth. If I eat that mushroom, will it kill me or sustain me? Faith in the circumstance could be lethal. So you might ask someone who might know. You attempt to discern the truth by going on more than your gut. That's what's had great results in terms of technology. So why not extend that to religion? Why don't we use the same methodology that we'd normally use? We know that it works, so why rely on faith if we want the truth? Obviously, the answer is that so many don't really want the truth, but I do, and I assume you do too, or you wouldn't be here, so let's keep going in that direction. How do we normally deal with not knowing something? I have an example for you. If our solar system was surrounded by a nebula, so we couldn't see anything outside of it, it would be perfectly reasonable to assume that is the entirety of existence. For a long time, that's what we'd think. That would be wrong, but scientific. Believing that there was a whole universe with untold numbers of other solar systems would be unsupported. It would be right ultimately, but the wrong way to go about approaching the subject. Sometimes we have to be wrong for a while. But believing in nothing is entirely reasonable, just like it's reasonable to believe that there's no God. I think most atheists would never say they know for certain that there's nothing beyond what we know. But for me, all I know is that I've seen nothing concrete that'll prove that there is something there. It's about having a reasonable default, as you do in any other scenario. But again, this is all reliant on the premise that truth has any value in itself. I think it does, as this is something we've been using since we discovered simple tools, but lots of people would rather go with what they want to be true in a particular situation than use that overarching principle. If I were to be generous, I'd call that a mere difference of methodology, but the difference is probably the result of my connecting everything together rather than treating it separately. There's something else that's bugged me for a while. The wealthiest societies try to make the best use of the universe's resources. Those that live the most effectively, that make the most scientific discoveries, those are who understand the universe better than the others and who use it the best. So you would expect that if there really were a God, then living on that assumption would make them more effective. The ability to improve ourselves simply does not fit with any religious narrative. Which brings me to a pet peeve. I think people give God or the devil credit for the things people do. To me, that removes personal responsibility. You can do something evil and say, the devil made me do it, I'm not to blame. And if you do something good, you say, it was God, not me, removing the motivation to act in the same way in future. Most people nowadays don't believe these things, but still, that annoys me when I see it. Of course, it's also annoying that they have no evidence deities are involved, but it's more concerning to me that they're willing to abdicate not only their responsibility for failures, but even the credit they should get for successes. It removes any need for change. It denies you your right to grow as an individual. Ultimately, none of this really concerns me because I know that people will do what is best for themselves. If God does not exist, people will come to realize it in greater numbers. If I'm wrong, it'll go the other way, and hopefully I'll find that out for myself. But ultimately, the less effective societies will change because they are made of people, and the drive to get ahead is not only useful for the individual, but will ensure that society will evolve to be more effective in future. But I think that's enough of that. I might do more on the subject, but I want to do other subjects too. Feel free to let me know what you want to see, and give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe if you want more.